Yes. Welcome, everybody. My name is François de Tarte. I was just not sure it has started. So I'll go with a small video as a ramble that I want to make. I'm in the waiting of a game that I have to play tonight. And by request by the game master will run the game, Anthony. I will do a video about a French role-playing game called Mournblade. Yes, I'm live, so maybe someone is watching this. Why not? All right, so I'm going live with this, and I want to talk about this French role-playing called Mournblade by his request. So Mournblade, maybe some of you recognize that guy over here. It's Elric of Melnibone. He's featured into a very classic series of novel written by Michael Moorcock, the Elric Cycle, that takes place in the Young Kingdoms. So this is some sort of a dark fantasy setting. Personally, I call it psychedelic fantasy. It's a very weird setting where the standard fantasy is kind of inverted down. That guy begins as being the emperor of the world, and he wants to drop down of his throne by himself to explore the world. The guy is sick. He's physically sick. He's coming from a very tortured race, very cruel race, and yeah, he wants to explore the world, and he has a very famous sword in hand, Stormbringer, which is a demon that steals the souls of its victims. If you have never read that, I recommend that you read that. At least one novel of the series. It's very well written. These are short novels, and yeah, it's one of my favorite series of all time. Many role-playing games has been made into that game setting since a long time. I knew about this series of novels through role-playing games. The most famous version of that game was published by Chaosium. It was called Stormbringer. At some point it was called Elric, and Mongoose Publishing got also their version of Elric. All of those role-playing games that I just told you about had something in common. It was, basically a percentile type of game system. You roll percentile dice, equal or less. Each of the versions had their own particular, but nevertheless, it felt the same. The role-playing game had success at some point throughout history of the role-playing game, but the latest versions, didn't really kick out well, in my opinion. The publishers kind of dropped down the license and all that. And then came that game. A French publisher called Département des Sombres Projets decided to publish their own version of the Young Kingdoms. And this time they decided that they would make it with a totally different game system than what was with the percentile type of game. Okay, they decided to go totally different. And the game is only published in French. And right now, I have a feeling that the license has been already dropped. When you go to the website, there's not really a website of the publisher, and we don't know if the game is being supported and all that. Some supplements can be found, but yeah, kind of on eBay or second-hand stores. The game is quite young. I think it's been published in 2013, something like that. But nevertheless, it caught my interest since I love the novels, and got myself a copy because I did want to see what was in there. Something that has helped me get through this book recently is that one friend of mine, an online friend, said to me that he wanted to run this game in the convention in Montreal that I got to. And so I was very happy to participate in that. And, I just rushed through reading most of the book. So my experience and what I will tell you about this game It's mostly because I read the book and I played a one shot. So it's basically that. So I will tell you my impression of the game. Well, the game system, to talk about it, it's different in that way. Basically, you have a score, an ability score, and an attribute. I have my character sheet here. Okay. Okay, you roll a d10 and you add this, and you have to beat the difficulty number, which is quite standard. One of the twists of the game is that you roll either a d10, which is the normal dice to roll, or if you want, you can roll a d20. The d20 is more wild, though, because only the even numbers are taken into account. If you roll an odd number, it's kind of rolling 0. So you don't add nothing to your basic score. And if you roll 1 or 11, it's an automatic failure, a critical failure. It's one of the twists. That game has lots of those kind of twists. You know, you have a points of bonne aventure, good fortune, which you can boost rolls or make special effects, and you have points of éclat, which is kind of another type of currency that has even more effects than the good fortune points. Yeah, you have different types of wounds that you can get. You know, lethal wounds, non-lethal wounds, and your soul. Okay, so many gauges are taken into account. Something special that the other role-playing games in that setting that were made, that is included in that game, is that your character, when you create it, you are already special. You are a chosen one from one of the gods of that world, and you're kind of a really above the norm. Well, it's not that you couldn't do that in the earlier versions of the game, but the basic way to create a character made you make a more standard adventure that you can find, that, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, but here you're really over the top. Okay, you begin with kind of superpowers that represents your god, and you are a chosen one, so you're working for those gods. So it's an interesting concept, which makes the character feel like, you know, as cool as Elric to start with. Okay, this is a very tragic kind of setting, so it fits very well. The game system, the way it's made, really reflects well the setting. I think, in my opinion, this is the best game system to emulate the Young Kingdoms and Stormbringer. The only problem it had, personally, with me, it's not a problem in itself, but it's a problem. I like more simpler games, and this is a complex game. But the complexity is there for a good reason, because every aspect of the rule really reflects something you can find in the novels. The way the magic works, it really feels like in the novel. The way combat works, lots of details are put into combat. You have lots of options. Every type of maneuver you want to do has their own effect and own modifiers and way to do it. And, you know, it really feels like a combat you would see in the novels. Very little combat, very well detailed. The way religion is presented in there, it's really in tune with what the novels are. The novels in themselves, you know, the series of novels doesn't have much information about, you know, how the things are in that world and the gods in themselves. You know, when they are named in the novels, it's more for the flavor of it, you know, the effect, what is going on right now. There's no details on the story of that god or anything. So, in the different versions of the role-playing game, many explanations were made by the authors of those games. Well, they did their own work. I think what they have developed for the world, the setting, really feels like what Michael Moorcock may had in his head. So the game I ran, you know, it was a one shot. And well, I felt that this game wasn't made for a one shot. This is the kind of game with all its complexity and the details put to make it feel like Elric and the novels. It's a game that you have to put in some sort of a stew, okay, that will boil slowly. Okay, you have to learn to get into the game and make. And if you want your full Elric experience, yeah, you have to take a couple of sessions into exploring different aspects of that kind of setting. And in a one shot, it felt difficult. The game master, was an excellent game master. Okay, the guy is over. I really had lots of fun playing with him. He's very good at what he's doing. He tried to explain the world and the game system in the first 30 minutes. Personally, I know about the setting. I read the novels, so it was easy for me to follow him in what he was saying. But I was just imagining those who have never read the novels. They only had a glimpse of what is going on. So yeah, we tried a game mechanically. We started with combat, and it was kind of a slow combat because yeah, it's a one shot, and suddenly we want to try different moves. We just described what we were doing. The game master could have just got away with, okay, roll a die, let's see what it does. But we wanted to experiment that game, okay, because just rolling and getting away with it, it wouldn't have shown why we were playing this game. Okay, it would have been just like another standard role playing game. So we were trying to apply the rules, and I was helping the game master because I had my book and I was flipping through the book, and we were exchanging into, okay, that's the way we do it. And yeah, it slowed down how the game started. I saw the potential of the game, but I feel that the game master didn't plan that the first combat was to be that long. Introductory combat, so yeah, he had at some point shortcut the combat to get into the next scene he has prepared. The next scene, which was he wanted us to have to have this scene where came the chosen ones, and yeah, I like the way he introduced that, his description on what happened when we were the chosen one of Ariok himself, which was the patron of Elric, okay, the same patron. So yeah, so we had that scene, and we had a mission for him. So yeah, the rest of the session was basically a little fast forwarded, and well, we had an ending that had a description that was faithful to could have seen in the novels. But yeah, I think that's where I realized that game was complex, and it was a game that you have to take time to invest. So it's not a game, it's not how can I say, a light game to take, and we just sit together, let's play role playing game tonight. We could do this with Dungeons and Dragons. Let's roll characters and play tonight, and have a laugh. No, that game needs a game master that knows not about the novels, of course, that really is digging the game system well, and wants to invest into a campaign. This is a game for campaigns, and the players, well, I think they need to feel that they really want to play this, because the game system is complex, so they have to learn about it and get into it. And they don't need to read the novels necessarily, though it might be a good thing to do so when you're a player. But you need people who wants to invest into a campaign. Okay, well, at least a couple of sessions to try to explore what this game has to offer, because it has a lot to offer. It's a complex game. right now I'm not much into complex games because my lifestyle doesn't allow me to get into such complexity. I'm more into easier game to learn. So it's a paradox. I think it's the best role-playing game to run with Elric. Unfortunately, it's not in English, not to my knowledge. That's the best one. But if I have to start tomorrow to play Stormbringer or something into the Elric world, well, I'd rather play with that version, the second Mongoose one, because it's easier. It's a good one, the second Mongoose. It's not that the earlier versions were not good. It's just that if you wanted to get that Elric feeling out of it, well, it needed some efforts from the players and the game master parts. They have to do their parts to make it feel Elric. Otherwise, it would have felt like any other fantasy role-playing game with, Young Kingdoms elements into it. Okay, it was easy to fall into a standard type of role-playing game, which is not bad. The game were well made. So, but the point is, if you want to do standard role-playing game, well, why not go with a standard title like Dungeons and Dragons or many other role-playing games? That game wouldn't stand out as being special if you run it with standard fantasy in mind. So if you wanted to make it Elric, well, it needed an effort. While there, you have to play with that effort. You have to pull that effort out of yourself to really get into Mournblade. And that game will direct you into playing the way something that will go the same way as what you will have. That's why I think it's the best role-playing game to run Elric. It's a very well-made game, but a little complex. You have to be ready to play for real. It's not a beer and pretzel one-night thing. Okay, it's a game that you need to invest. Yeah, I was very glad to read this. It felt good to me okay, that's a real good role-playing game about that game world. So I don't know if one day it will come in English. I hope so, in fact, because that game is really worth it. Nevertheless, I wanted to share that with you to talk about my impression of that French role-playing game. Yeah, I'm presenting a French role-playing game. There's another French YouTuber, it's called Soulclone6, that is presenting some French role-playing games. So the French market is very particular, and lots of good role-playing games are to be discovered. And ironically, Mournblade, which is an English property, has been turned that good with something made in France. So that was it. François Letard, JDR D30. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them. So, and up to next time, I hope you have as much fun in your life as in your games. Good night.